the Georgia businessman was part of AT&T's multi-billion-dollar initiative to ensure that more African Americans became suppliers working with the company. Instead of that happening, they contend the media company refused to work with the company and stole their business plan. Joining me now from Atlanta is Jerome Edmondson. He's the president of EDN Communications and Technology. And from Dallas, Texas, Derek Scott, a Black AT&T executive, who said he's a victim of ongoing intimidation tactics and other criminal behavior at AT&T. Glad to have both of you here. So first and foremost, in terms of what is the basic allegation you're making against AT&T?
Well, Roland, first of all, thank you for having us on your show today. And, you know, when we look at technology in our country and bridging the digital divide, you know, from the 9/11 Commission, the U.S. Department of Commerce made a decision to put out an RFP to make sure that never again in this country first responders would ever have to go without communicating. And from that, the Department of Commerce birthed the FirstNet Authority. AT&T won that $9 billion lawsuit and 20-year, $47 billion initiative. EDN Communication, my company's communication and process as being the first Black FirstNet authorized dealer, was to ensure that this technology reached our community and bridged the digital divide in Black community and Black law enforcement. And not only did we set out to do that and win every month for an 8-month time period, and I want you to understand and the listeners to understand that this contract only lasted for 8 months before it was terminated for convenience. But for that 8-month time period, we were first and second every month in the company, putting this technology in Black law enforcement with organizations like the City of Dallas, Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice, Houston. Even when the NFL came to Atlanta, we put over 500 devices for security and inside of the NFL to ensure that this technology worked. And all of a sudden, one day I wake up and got with over $25 million in sales for it to an email that says, you know what? You're growing too big. Your contract is terminated for convenience. And the gentleman that's on the phone with us, Derek Scott, was my AT&T manager who said differently. And I'll let you tell you what happened to him once he began to refute that terrible decision that they made.
Derek?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And thanks again for the time today. I think Jerome's absolutely right. This was a 9-month process where Jerome and I didn't know each other before this time and point, and they put us together. And when they did, we started to do exactly what we were asked to do. It was my job, and Jerome to do his job. Once that began to happen, I started to see some anomalies inside of AT&T that made me question, was this something that was across the board for all people that were in this program and partners in this channel, or was this just specific for the Black entrepreneur that was into this organization? As I dug deeper and started asking questions, that's exactly what I found. So once I found that, I started asking the questions, if this is going to be something that's for everyone, or are we treating them differently? Once I started exposing that, there became the issues of the 9 months of complete hell for myself individually inside AT&T, as an AT&T employee, and for Jerome outside. So to answer your question specifically, I'm specifically in a lawsuit with AT&T for retaliation and for racial discrimination, or for discrimination rather. So those are the two things from my perspective inside of AT&T that led to this 9-month to 1 year retaliation and discrimination lawsuit.
Wow. And so where does the suit stand, first of all, and has there been a response, Jerome, from AT&T?
Well, no, they haven't responded. We've had to sue them over and over again. You know, Roland, I was the nation's first Black Denny's franchise owner. You know, when the NAACP, with the same Department of Commerce, when NAACP settled a fair share agreement with Denny's and found them guilty of discrimination, this is probably larger and bigger than that particular point. And from that point, I became the nation's first Black Denny's franchise owner. And when it comes to supplier development, we begin to put together these different processes to ensure that Black people are part of contracts with companies like AT&T, AGO Resources, Home Depot, and companies that my company has helped grow and build. I've been with AT&T for 16 years, helping grow their minority and diverse force. And for them to do this to me, and then for Derek to mention it and retaliate against him, and at the same time, our goal is to ensure that, number one, this happens to no one else, but also to help everyone understand that every month they're making millions of dollars for technology that we put in Black communities and Black law enforcement, and we're simply out of that. And even worse than that, Roland, to go back and with organizations like the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement and other relationships that I brought into the AT&T world, and to begin to take my name and my company and destroy my character and my name is even as painful, because we invest in our community. Just 30 days ago with Butler Street YMCA, I'm sure you're familiar with the historic Butler Street YMCA area, we just launched a Good Trouble John Lewis Memorial Park. And those are the kind of things that companies and Black businesses like myself invest back in our community. So when these things happen, you don't just destroy my company or take from me, you take from the communities, the people, and the things that we invest in, just like, companies and other small businesses that we support and bring in as sub-suppliers under us. So this is a big thing as it relates to AT&T, and what are they doing about it? Nothing. We've had to sue them for it. We're in court now. They fought to try to move this case to Dallas. We moved it back to Atlanta. And so we're here in court in Atlanta trying to get me paid. I mean, if one thing to get rid of my contract, Roland, but to not pay me and to just say you've got $25 million in sales force over that. You got an 85% success ratio. You took me to the Masters because I'm this great employee of yours. You put me and my wife on a free trip, gave us free money as one of the top performers in your company. And when it got time for you to pay me the money that you owe me, you get rid of me for a word called convenience. We just can't let that happen to a company like that. The nation's number one telecom.
This reminds me of, first of all, there are several things it reminds me of. And I think back to there was Willie Gary representing some brothers who came up with the idea for a sports complex in Florida. They successfully sued Disney, and they won that lawsuit. And when I think about, look, when I was just talking about going on a break, we got my company got a call today from a firm that's handling the advertising for several political campaigns, and what they put on the table is an abomination. And I'm not going to name the campaigns yet. I'm not going to put the amount out there yet. But let me just say, I damn near get paid that to give a speech.
Wow.
And the thing that's interesting to me is, and I keep saying this to people, if you want to talk about why we are in the condition that we are in, it's because Black companies are not allowed to be able to build capacity, be able to grow. We have the numbers. We can show how great we do. Joe Anthony, when he had to sue a DDB Worldwide, said they got a $4 billion media contract from the U.S. Army. He said they helped get it, but then once they got the contract, kicked them to the curb. So then he sued them. And so we see this, and what we're seeing is that we're, in Derek, your case, you're executive there. We were frozen out of corporate America for quite some time. But even we're talking about building our businesses. This is what happens when we even launch businesses. Then they starve us and then force us to be able to take pennies on the dollar or refuse to pay us at all.
You're exactly right, Roland. And not only that, can you imagine being the poster child? AT&T has me all over the country. We're going to spend $3 billion, listen to this word, with Black suppliers by 2020. And I'm in periodicals across the country and all of that. And within that same year, before they announced that they spent over $3 billion, they didn't announce that they took my money and terminated my contract for convenience. Look at what happened to Byron Allen. The same thing with AT&T when they bought CNN and Time Warner. They shut Byron out. They just simply took his programs off. What did Byron have to do? He was awarded $50 million and then sued Comcast for over $1 billion, and that one was settled. We have to speak about, because if we as business owners will begin to push, just like we did Denny's, look at the success with Denny's. Denny's was $27 a share until black people got on Roland Martin's show and said, we're not going to take it. And guess what happened? Those shares went down to 7 cents a share, and I became the nation's first black Denny's franchise owner and helped other organizations get that. We've got to do the same thing with AT&T and its FirstNet authority, because FirstNet is owned by the U.S. Department of Commerce. This is a Biden administration, and there's a bill that Congresswoman Demings is authoring right now for the renewal of this contract. We need to just call Congresswoman Demings and our Congressional Black Caucus leaders and say, do not approve this next bill, approve FirstNet again until there is inclusion for black suppliers inside of that. And we need to talk about the dark side of diversity, equity, inclusion. We can't leave the black out of diversity, equity, inclusion, because that's another thing that we're faced with, white women and all those different things. Nothing against that, Roland, but it's just what we face to face all the time. And then you give us these contracts, you take us from us, and we've got all these employees and everyone else that we're embarrassed and we're out here in the relationships because you can take it and no one says anything. Not on my watch. I'm going to sue.
Don't even get me started. DEI is totally BS for me. Now, Derek, you say you're being targeted. So are you a part of Jerome's lawsuit, or do you have another claim against AT&T?
I have a separate claim. So as much as we're talking about outside, it's happening inside as well. The shackles are on inside as well as outside. So I'll give you a few examples of what they've done to me since I've met Jerome and since I've started asking these questions. They've done things like put me on a performance improvement plan, even though I made 110% plan that year of 2018 at that point in time, 2018, with 5 of my co-peers of 7 that were under 70%, had absolutely zero retaliation against them whatsoever and should have been put on a performance improvement plan. What they did in the opposite is help them get through that point. So that happened through the end of 2018 in conjunction with what they were doing to Jerome. So they purposely spent time taking my travel away from me, making me do extra work. I spent an extra 40 to 50 hours a week just explaining my daily job on top of doing my job, and I still performed at that job. And what did they do the following year when it was time for a review time? They gave me a 0% raise. Out of the 200,000+ employees that work for AT&T, everyone is required by their own standards to have a performance review every year and a time frame by February and closed out by March and April time frame. They did not do mine at all. I had to end up going to them 4 or 5 different times, filing multiple claims to get them to even open my annual review. When my annual review was finally done, it was July. And what they did in that annual review is they let the manager that put me on the performance plan that should have never happened put negative performance on my review that's still there today. They have taken and ruined my reputation. They've ruined my career. They've ruined my success model. They've ruined my outside reputation within my company. They've taken money from me, and they continue to do so. And the people that are doing this are still in place. This is a systemic problem within the company that continues to happen. And until we do something about it and say something about it and stop these type of oppressions, it will continue to happen.
Now, Roland, if you can take this into perspective, this is a young brother here that fought for me. I had no idea that he filed an EEOC complaint about how they were treating me differently. I had no idea that when they came after him, he had to file a second EEOC complaint for retaliation. This is unbeknownst to me. I'm thinking they're attacking me, but this young man was in position to be an AT&T officer, and they gave him to me because they said, well, we think Jerome can work better with a black manager. Okay, I did. We were successful at what we were doing. We're number 1 into the company every month. We're beating companies like Panasonic, Dell. Nobody could compete with us because it's true that if we come together as a community and begin to do business with one another, it was law enforcement. We didn't just deploy Department of Juvenile Justice, which was the first net deployment and the largest. We put AT&T University in there. We went in and made sure those kids we started Kids That Code, hackathon, app. We invested into the future of that. They've got years of their partnerships with their own family and so forth and bring them up in the system. But the moment that they sent a letter, an email to the city of Dallas saying that, and I'm in the middle of getting paid, Roland, $1.8 million with the city of Dallas and more. I'm in the middle of getting my first checks on that. They shut it all off and then told the city of Dallas that they don't work with me anymore. The city of Dallas sent an email to them and said, if EDN Communications is not a part of this deployment, we are not deploying. We hired, the chief of police in the city of Dallas at that time, Chief Renee Hall, had a youth organization. We brought those young mentees from her youth organization. Not only did we teach them technology and bring them into this cutting edge technology for law enforcement all over the country, all over America, we made sure that when they graduated, if they wanted to get in that, they could get jobs, they could get hired. You're not just terminating me. You're not just getting rid of my company, taking my money, but you're also taking the future of what I stand for and bridging the gap for the digital divide in Black communities. And I can't sleep on that, Roland. I mean, it hurts me that Derek, who is in the process of being an officer inside the company, just because he stood up for me, he is now being blackballed and retaliated and trying to force him out just because he made the right decision. And we don't even want to have a conversation with the people that they shut down. They couldn't even call me, Roland, because this was going on.
All right, gentlemen, certainly keep us abreast of what happens with both of your cases. Thanks a lot.
We absolutely
Thank you.
Thank you, Roland.
I'm going to bring my panel back, Erica, Greg, and Reese. And Greg, I'll start with you on this one. It's amazing to me, and I post this all the time. I could talk about some bullshit. I could post some bullshit on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, and all of a sudden, folk will respond like crazy. And I posted something the other day. I forgot what it was, and I actually, I know what it was. Folk were talking about. They were talking about Nick Cannon and his children, and I said, well, Nick had his 10, Eddie Murphy got 10, and all these folks responded. And what was a trip was, it may have had 500, 600, 700 comments. And I said, you know what, that's real interesting. Because when I post about us not getting access to billions, is 7, 8, 10. And what I keep saying to Black folks, if we are not following the money, that's why we have this segment called Where's Our Money? This is why we are in the situation we're in right now. This is why we are hoping for white philanthropy to give to our HBCUs. This is why our Black civil rights organizations are not funded by us. They're funded by corporate America. This is why they can't be aggressive in going after corporate America in cases like this, because that's who's actually funding them. And so if folk don't understand, if you talking about America and you ain't talking about the money, you ain't talking about America.
Roland, I tell you, brother, I don't have a good answer. I mean, the capitalist system we live in is not defined by countries. It's defined by corporations. And these interlocking international corporations that continue to oppress people globally. Now, how that plays out locally is readily apparent. I mean, this lawsuit, having read the complaint, it isn't surprising, it isn't stunning, but it is, I think, a reminder to those of us who can cut through all of this noise to pay attention. It is a reminder of how power works. You're absolutely right. I mean, to read the complaint and understand that Brother Edmondson avers that AT&T didn't even know what Noble was, didn't realize that Black law enforcement officials through cities like Dallas and Atlanta control over 50% of first responder budgets. And so when AT&T figured out that he had better in than they did, and in the complaint he avers that his sales force outsold all of AT&T's Lily White sales force, they basically decided to cut his throat. I mean, you talk about a move that we should be up in arms about. It was remarkable to see how these white boys just decided, hell no. And so for Dallas to respond as it did, for him to get the venue, continue to be in Atlanta, I can imagine Jerry Jones picking up the phone, talking to his golf buddies at AT&T and saying, we're going to get this N-word out the paint. I don't give a damn what you... And then meanwhile, here we are paying our monthly bills to AT&T. worried about how many kids my friend Nick Cannon has. And we can't get grabbed by the lapels and understand that until we can pull together the one power we do have, if we will actualize it, which is numbers of people, meaning we have to not only support Black news media, we have to listen to what's being said and then think for ourselves. I really don't see a future forward for the American Negro, Roland. I really don't, because we're going to be victims.
Right. And Erica, this is when we talk. I was telling someone this earlier. In Dr. King's book, Where Do We Go From Here, Chaos or Community? He said that there are 4 institutions that are prime position to liberate Black America. He said the Negro Church, the Negro Press, Negro fraternities and sororities, and Negro professional and business organizations. And what he said specifically, and the reason I focus on this, obviously, because it's media. I focus on this because what he said is that the Negro press cannot fall for the conservative and must maintain its militancy.
That's right.
Then he talked about professional organizations and fraternities and sororities. What he's talking about, this is the collective mass of Black people where you can use your power and your leverage to be able to make a series of demands. And so if all of a sudden, that's what Operation Breadbasket was about. That's what Reverend Leon Sullivan was doing in Philadelphia, who introduced that concept to Dr. King, who adopted it as Operation Breadbasket. There were plans to create Operation Breadbasket chapters across the country, separate from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. As Coretta Scott King said, they killed my Martin when he started talking about the money. And so what I am trying to get these hard-headed Black folks today who keep saying, man, you out here begging a white man for money. Well, fool, you go. What did the robber say? Why you rob banks? Because that's where the money's at. So part of our deal is we've got to have our institutions, our Black churches, fraternities and sororities, business, professional organizations, and Black media align, asking the question, what a check. I know, look, reparation folk, you trying to get the political people to do that. I'm talking about the money that exists right now. And if we are so fixated, Erica, on bullshit, on housewives, on comedic shows, on laughing and dancing and how many kids somebody have and whatever, then they sitting here going to the bank cashing checks, and then we still sitting here broke as hell wondering why we can't afford to build our communities.
And the other thing, a few points which you made there, when we talk about pillars, the first one that you named, Black folks, the Black church, we are the most philanthropic group in this country. So that's off the top, period. That's where people take their coins, to the church. And we are the most giving, not even talking about the extra tipping that we do to kind of add in the notion that Black people don't tip, which is a complete and utter lie. But then that makes me think about, too, when you talk about those 4 specific institutions, about the Chamber of Commerce. Now, they're supposed to represent all businesses within a community, but we know that that's another arm of Republican right-wing ideology and ways to get people riled up and to communicate to those folks that are in Congress. They do it all day, every day. They have an institution whereby members do pay a fee to be a part of the chamber at different levels, and then they communicate their list of demands to their legislators, both at the state level and at the congressional level. So listen, I think, it's a few things. We can do housewives and we can also be about our business at the same time, but we have to do something that I've heard Reese and Greg talk about earlier. We have to keep our foot on the gas. And I think that we can do that with a real focus, with an understanding that this is something that happens in elections with Republicans all the time. There's always foolishness that we see on their side. But one thing that we know that they have in common is that Republicans lean heavily authoritarian, but they all sing off of one sheet of music. So if we can get people to understand that the policies that are going to help progress us and move us forward and get us to a place where we are able to call our own shots are not with the party that literally wants to see us dead. And that lies heavily within the Republican Party, the chamber, and other entities that really are called to make sure that their list of demands are made known and that that legislation and policy does pass through.
All right, folks, back to that Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Hold no punches.
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay Black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?